Hi, Gus here, and coming to you with some more theological pains, and we're continuing our series on where is God during COVID, or as I said last time, where is God through any pain or suffering. And today we're tackling a very difficult topic, and that is the story of Job. Now, the book of Job is very difficult because it deals with philosophical concepts. The original Hebrew was written in a poetic nature, and if you have a direct translation, you're going to struggle to understand many of these things. So if you go through the book of Job, you've got to use many different translations and also paraphrases. They sometimes make the idea a lot clearer. Now, I want to start off with this quote. A brief survey of the immense literature on Job reveals that Job's world is much closer to ours than the world of the intervening centuries. For every earlier interpretation sought to deny some piece of that picture we find undeniable. Some medieval Christian interpretations did this in the most straightforward of ways. They simply censored those pieces of the text in which Job expresses rage. And what we find here is that the book of Job is not a church school book. This doesn't sugarcoat anything. There's difficult passages that are sometimes hard to understand when you have an oversimplistic picture of God. Now, when we go to Job 1 verse 1, the introduction, we read, "There was a man named Job living in the land of Uz, who worshipped God and who was faithful to him. He was a good man, careful not to do anything evil." Now, what this says is Job is not bad. He's not insincere. He's a good guy. He's one of the best. And when we continue, one day the members of the heavenly court came to present themselves before the Lord, and the accuser, Satan, came with them. "Where have you come from?" the Lord asked Satan. Satan answered the Lord, "I have been patrolling the earth, watching everything that's going on." And this is Job 1 verse 6 and 7. Now, I want to digress a little bit here. It talks of the members of this heavenly court as the sons of God. Now, when we go to Luke 3 verse 38, it talks of Adam as a son of God. And in Job 38 verse 7 we read, when the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy. Now the word Lucifer refers to morning star. So when it speaks of stars, it's referring to angels. The sons of God are the Adams that were created, and it's most likely that God had created several Adams on several worlds, and this was a big UN meeting. You see, Satan got kicked out of heaven, and then he got Adam and Eve to sin. And he took ownership of the world, illegitimately, but he claimed, "Hey, they chose me, this is my place." And that would continue until Christ came and died on the cross. And that's why in the Gospels we read in Luke 10 verse 18, Jesus answered them, "I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven." You see, Christ was foreseeing the dethronement of Satan, where he would take the place that Adam had lost through his sin. Now, in this discussion, God says to Satan in verse 8, "Have you noticed my friend Job? There is no one quite like him, honest and true to his word, totally devoted to God and hating evil." And what God's saying here, have you looked at Job? He's my champ. He's the best. Now, when we continue verse 9 to 11, Satan retorts, "So do you think Job does all that out of sheer goodness of his heart? Why, no one ever had it so good. You pamper him like a pet, make sure nothing bad ever happens to him, or his family, or his possessions. Bless everything he does, he can't lose. But what do you think would happen if you reached down and took away everything that is his? He'd curse you right to your face, that's what." Now, let's be careful. No rushing here. Why do bad things happen? Well, because God and Satan are having bets? Now, that's a horrible idea. You see, this is not an explanation of why do bad things happen. This is telling us a story, but it's not saying, oh, this is why it happens because God and Satan are having bets. That's not the case at all. And there's a war in heaven. And we don't fully understand it. It's too subtle for our human minds. Only one day when we get to heaven and our minds are renewed, then we'll be able to understand all the subtleties in this war. Up until then, not going to work. Now, Satan goes away and he gets the privilege to take away everything that belongs to Job. Family, possessions, the lot. But after a while, there's a second galactic UN meeting. And we read in Job 2, verse 1 to 3. When the day came for the heavenly beings to appear before the Lord again, Satan was there among them. The Lord asked him, "Where have you been?" Satan answered, "I have been walking here and there, roaming around the earth." "Did you notice my servant Job?" the Lord asked. "There is no one on earth as faithful and as good as he is. He worships me and is careful not to do anything evil. You persuaded me to let you attack him for no reason at all, but Job is still faithful as ever." Now that is pretty impressive, that Job can lose all that and say, well, I'm still sticking with God. I mean, Job's the champion. Now let's look at a little difference. In verse 4 and 5 we read, Satan replied, "A person will give up everything in order to stay alive. But now suppose you hurt his body, he will curse you to your face." And on the opposite side, verse 6, God says, "So the Lord said to Satan, all right, he is in your power, but you are not to kill him." Now, is God being merciful here? Right? You can make Job suffer, but you can't take his life. Satan then goes and attacks Job's body. He makes him sick. He's sitting there on the ash heap, scratching his sores to get rid of the worms that's in there. And that is a horrible thought, no matter how you look at it. Now, we read further in verse 11 of Job 2. 3 of Job's friends heard of the trouble that had befallen him. Each travelled from his own country. Eliphaz from Teman, Bildad from Shuah, Zophar from Namath, and went together to Job to keep him company and comfort him. We don't know where these countries exactly were. But if you think about it, if I am in one area of the world and people come from other areas, they're going to come from the east, the west, the north, the south, wherever. There's 3 guys coming because these 3, they're coming from the rest of the world. And what the writer is trying to convey is that Job's audience isn't simply 3 friends from 3 countries. It encompasses the whole world. This is the reality in the entire world. And his friends, in the next verse, when they first caught sight of him, they couldn't believe what they saw. They hardly recognized him. They cried out in lament, ripped their robes, and dumped dirt on their heads as a sign of their grief. And this was good. When a person's in suffering, they don't want to hear philosophy. They don't want to hear quick answers. They need somebody to be there with them, to give validation to their suffering. And Job 2 verse 13. Then they sat with him on the ground, 7 days and nights. They sat there without saying a word. They could see how rotten he felt, how deeply he was suffering. And you almost want to say, if the story just stopped there. Job's friends are good people. They care for Job. They've got good intentions. And they're not putting on. They seriously have a problem. But with Job's suffering, it's too much for them. Unfortunately, they go further and they want to apply human logic to something that begins with heavenly thinking. Moreover, and this is perhaps the most crucial point, the Job of the prologue and the epilogue seem to be a wholly different man from the one we see in the poem. There his rage and rebellion know no bounds. In the prologue and epilogue, we only see the Job whose humble piety became proverbial. The man whose only response to the complete destruction of life as he knew it, and all 10 of his children, was to utter the sentence, "The Lord gave and the Lord took. Blessed be the name of the Lord." Now, this is very true. When you start Job, when you end Job, he's the serene person that just takes things. But that in between, we hear his rage, his frustration, his depression. He's so human. And any one of us that have gone through similar circumstances understand it fully, because we felt like that. And yes, I know biblical characters, even the best of them, sometimes suffer from depression. In Job 3 verse 3 and 3 verse 6 we read, "Obliterate the day I was born, blank out the night I was conceived. And the night of my conception, the devil take it, rip the date from the calendar, delete it from the almanac." Here are some quotes I got off the internet, and I think they give a good expression of what depression is all about. "You wake up every morning to fight the same demons that left you so tired the night before, and that, my love, is bravery." "What's depression like?" he whispered. I replied, "It's like drowning, except you can see everyone around you breathing. I miss me, the old me, the happy me, the bright me, the smiling me, the laughing me, the gone me." And Job is not saying, "Kill me," he's saying, "I don't want to ever have existed. Obliterate me. Forget about me." And now the friends start opening their mouths and they talk. And Eliphaz starts off in Job 5 verse 7, and he says, "It's human. Mortals are born and bred for trouble. As certainly as sparks fly upward. What a blessing when God corrects you." Now, this is, yes, we are sinners. That's not why bad things happen to us. And whenever God disciplines, he's very clear to the person, "You did this wrong, I am going to discipline you," and then he restores. I mean, when you discipline somebody, you don't continue to discipline and just keep going. That's cruel. So Eliphaz, as well-intentioned, is very wrong. And when we look at the background, God is not punishing Job. Job didn't do anything wrong. He's not guilty in this case. And it continues. Next, Bildad speaks in Job 8 verse 5. "Here's what you must do, and don't put it off any longer. Get down on your knees before God Almighty." Did Job do anything to cause his suffering? On the contrary, he was doing the opposite. And is there therefore anything Job can do to relieve his suffering? Unfortunately not, because it's an attack by Satan. And suffering is always random and reckless. There's no reason for it. That's why we suffer. Nothing you can do is going to take away the pain and suffering. And then Zophar speaks. Job 11 verse 13 and 16. "Still, if you set your heart on God and reach out to him, you'll forget your troubles. They will be like old, faded photographs." Now, you won't believe me, we still find this concept. You must just believe and God will fix everything. Now, does suffering happen because I don't have faith? Job didn't lack faith. On the contrary, he was very faithful. And pain and suffering give no consideration to the person. They don't care about you. It happens whether you are from what part of the world, how much money you have, it doesn't matter. Pain and suffering just happen. Now, when we go to some other modern day advice, we find a lot of Job's friends still hanging around. People will tell you, just believe, or you must do 1, 2, 3, ABC. You have sinned and that's why you're suffering, or you don't have enough faith. Oh, you must just come right. Get up and fight and go on. Or my pet peeve, I'll pray for you. Now, why do people say these things? I mean, they're not right. They're horribly wrong. But you see, people care, but they're outsiders. And they say these things to hide their own powerlessness. And they're ignorant, but they don't want to reveal it. So we say this, and then I sound like I've got an answer and it's okay, and I can at least stay away from somebody else's pain because I don't know how to deal with it. Job 27, verse 1 and 2. I swear by the living Almighty God, who refuses me justice and makes my life bitter. And he's saying, it is unfair what's happening to me. Where's the justice? Why me? How long? Why won't it end? And these are very human questions. We all ask them when we go through pain and suffering. But then suddenly a change comes. Here we find Elihu. And he doesn't come from a specific country. He's not named specifically as one of Job's friends. He's, I don't know, somebody that just kind of pops out there. But he starts to speak. And he says in Job 32, verse 15 and 16, if Job had been arguing with me, I would not answer with your kind of logic. You sit there baffled with nothing more to say. And when we go to verse 33, verse 29, this is the way God works. Over and over again, he pulls our souls back from certain destruction so we'll see the light and live in the light. Now, this is, you've got to look very finely, because what Elihu is reminding, he's saying firstly to Job's friends, he says, your logic fails. It doesn't make sense. It sounds pretty, but when I start looking at the practical application, it's a mess. And now he's saying to Job, Job, has God not helped you in the past? Has God not redeemed you, taken you out of trouble? And what he's doing, he's reminding Job of what God has done in the past. How Job can see in other people's lives, in his own lives, that God never leaves a person. They go through pain and suffering, but he picks them up out of it. And the pain and suffering you're going through right now, Job, you can't see the end, but God is still present. On this view, Job is seen as lacking not righteousness or humility, but maturity. Job's questions and outrage are based on naive, misguided assumptions about reward and punishment. For why should we think that the universe is just? Modern psychology explains how we come to share such assumptions. Our parents raised us with the sticks and carrots, so we project this pattern onto the universe at large. You see what that author is saying? We grow up, and if you're a good boy, you get nice Christmas presents, or nice sweet, or something big, you're rewarded. And if you're bad, well, you're disciplined, whatever form that might take. And we grow up with this childish mindset, and we come into the world, into this universe, and we expect the same rules. And I think if you've gone through pain and suffering, you realize those rules don't apply. It's not that simple. If that was the case, all the bad people would be suffering and all the good people would be doing well. There comes another change. Here God appears, and in Job 38 verse 4 and verse 31 he says, were you there when I made the world? If you know so much, tell me about it. Can you catch the eye of the beautiful Pleiades sisters or distract Orion from his hunt? Now, what is God saying to Job? Job, you little nitwit, you don't know anything, I'm smarter. No, that's not what he's doing. Have you ever looked at lightning, at thunder? And I mean, sometimes when you have these big storms, it's just amazing. And what God is saying, I control that. I make it happen. Or, I love astronomy. I love to look at the stars, and when you see those immense stars, the systems, the hugeness of the universe, God is saying to Job, I control every little thing there. The big stars, the little quarks, the gluons, all and everything in between, I'm in control of that. When you stand on a mountain and you realize how small you are, God's saying, I put that mountain there, I put the ice on top of it. It's all me. Now, God is not simply shutting Job down with questions he can't answer. This one author wrote, then God's answer can be read as saying, not shut up, you weakling. But you want order? I'll show you order. You see, God is saying to Job, I control everything. And I know it's very easy to look at the stars and the rain and say, well, we can explain it scientifically, so it's not God, it's science. It just kind of happens. But those rules of science, the very principles that we discover in science, who made them? God is saying to Job, I control everything, even the pain and suffering you are going through, I'm in control. You can't see the end, you can't see the plan, but I have one. And when God appears, you always want to say, what changes? Well, the first thing that changes is justice. After God had finished addressing Job, he turned to Eliphaz the Temanite and said, I have had it with you and your 2 friends. I'm fed up. You haven't been honest either with me or about me, not the way my friend Job has. You see what he's saying? He's saying to Job's 3 friends, you are talking nonsense. You've angered me. What you've said is absolute rubbish. He says, Job, despite his outburst, despite his depression, despite his frustration, his anger at me, he's still my friend. He spoke correctly. God is bringing justice to Job's situation, saying he did not suffer because of sin or anything. I judge him and he's a good person. Job 42 verse 8. So here's what you must do. Take 7 bulls and 7 rams and go to my friend Job. Sacrifice a burnt offering on your own behalf. My friend Job will pray for you and I will accept his prayer. He will ask me not to treat you as you deserve for talking nonsense about me and for not being honest with me as he has. The Lord's actually saying, listen, I don't want to hear from you. You better ask Job to mediate on your behalf. Then maybe I'll listen. But I'm ready to kill you because you have spoken such lies and have not been honest. Then in verse 10 of Job 42, after Job had interceded for his friends, God restored his fortune and then doubled it. Now, it's almost anticlimactic. God comes and he says, Job, look at everything I've done. And then, Job, you're right, your friends were wrong, intercede, whoops, and everything turns around. But here is the key point in Job. The moment God was revealed, Job's suffering changed to joy. And suffering does not end because I say something. After this video, suffering's not going to end, it's not going to change. When God enters the picture, Job's pain and suffering changed. And this is because only God can end suffering. I can't do it. Nobody can do it. Governments can put money in, help people that are going in a disaster area. It doesn't stop the suffering. Only God can do that. There was a psychologist, Jean Piaget, and he studied children, and he concluded that there are 4 stages of development. The first one is your chaotic stage, and then you have your legal stage, your rebellious stage, and then you reach maturity. Now, in Job chapter 1 and 2, we find Job at a legal stage. And if you look carefully with this in mind, you'll see Job is concerned. Maybe my children sin. I must sacrifice for them. I must sacrifice for this. I must do this. Your chaotic stage is a person totally without God. But Job's at that legal stage. When Job's suffering comes, he goes into a rebellious stage. He says it doesn't make sense. All this legal rules and stuff doesn't work in the bigger picture. And then God appears. And that's the change over from Job's suffering, the return of his joy, of who he was. And there we find a mature Job. Job is no longer doing this, doing that, expecting rewards. He is allowing God to bless him. Everything comes from God and he's thankful for that. Now, the difference between the two, a legal Job was concerned about sin, concerned about the sin of his children. We were taught he was blameless, he was upright. He wasn't a fake legal Christian, he was a truly legal Christian. But when we go to the mature Job, he intercedes for his friends according to the command of God. The Lord restored, the Lord blessed. You notice the shift in focus? The legal Job is about what Job did. The mature Job is about what God did. And I want to read this quote. It says, in the end, Job offers no philosophical solution to the mystery of suffering. Indeed, it seems to suggest that no such solution can be found. But by the conclusion of the book, Job has received something far more important than the intellectual understanding: personal communion with God. In this way, patient Job is presented as a model of the person of faith. You see, Job, the book Job, is not saying this is the answer, this is the explanation. It's saying the best way to deal with pain and suffering is communion with God. As I said last time, pain and suffering are part of salvation. Pain and suffering can be a gift. And God will bestow gracefully on all who need to draw closer to Him in spiritual maturity. You know, we say, I want to grow as a Christian. Well, some parts of you will grow in the good times, but there's some parts that will only grow spiritually when you go through tough times. This is why God does not let Job die. The grace that provides pain is towards Job's growth in salvation. Now, let's make it very practical. You've got somebody that's suffering. Don't try to play psychologist. There are psychologists, they're professionals. You're most likely not one of them. If you are, that's fine. But if you're not a psychologist, don't pretend to be one. And don't try to play God. You don't know why. The best thing you can do is to simply sit there with the person suffering and be with them. Share, acknowledge that they are suffering. All of us, at one time in our life, will go through a Job experience. And I can't tell you when it's going to end. All I can tell you is that it will end. Somewhere along the line, your pain and suffering will come to an end. I want to end off with this one. It's cute, but I think it's also very true. Pooh, yeah, Piglet, I'm tired of all this. I am too, Piglet, I am too. Anybody that's gone through Job's situation is tired of all of this. We're tired of the pain, the suffering. We're tired of this sick world. And when you go through that pain and suffering, there's a voice inside you that seems to scream, but there must be something better. And you get frustrated because you can't find it. But it's not for us to find. When God reveals Himself, He's going to change this world from one filled with pain and suffering to a world filled with joy and happiness. I hope this has helped, and I hope to those who are suffering that you will also have your moment when God reveals Himself and your pain and suffering turns to joy and happiness.